Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. I'm Noah Hiles. He's Brian Batko. And Brian, first time making content together here at the PG, and wish it was about something a little bit more lighthearted or positive, but unfortunately it's not. Brian and I are here to talk about the Damar Hamlin situation. For those who don't know, Damar Hamlin, former Central Catholic standout and Pitt Panther, current Buffalo Bills starting safety, made a tackle in the first quarter on Monday Night Football against the Bengals. He went into cardiac arrest. They provided him with CPR on the field. He was taken off the field in an ambulance and taken to a hospital in Cincinnati, where he remains in critical condition. And not a lot of updates on his status, but we're going to try to cover it as best as we can, being that he is a Pittsburgh guy through and through. And as the current Pitt beat writer, I decided to bring on a guy who has covered Damar Hamlin at great lengths. I believe you covered him in high school, Brian, and also at the collegiate level when you were on the Pitt beat before you were a big fancy Steelers reporter like you are now. But Brian, yeah, I just wanted to ask you a couple questions. First things first, I mean, can you just talk about your introduction to Damar Hamlin, what you remember about him when you first interviewed him or covered him, whenever that was?
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, like you said at the top, it's tough not having any, concrete updates. But what can you do? I mean, it's, our job is to kind of fill this space in between. And, that's not easy to do, but at least can shine a light on, Damar, the person, because that's what we're all waiting to hear some good news on here as soon as it happens, or whenever it has to happen, as long as it's positive, right? So, yeah, I mean, he was such a big recruit coming out of Central Catholic High School. But, before I even mention Central, I think it's just important to say that, Damar's from McKees Rocks, PA, which is, not the easiest place to grow up around here. But the cool thing about it with him was he always let you know that he was from McKees Rocks. He wasn't one of these guys who plays at Central and you're like, is he from the North Hills? Is he from the South Hills? Is he from the city? Where would he be if he wasn't at Central? No, he was always very upfront about, I'm a McKees Rocks guy through and through. And, as people are seeing through his foundation, Chasing M's, and the toy drive that has now gotten over $4 million in donations from people around the world. I mean, he just wanted to give back to his community. So that was, the first thing that I think people kind of came to realize about him. Central Catholic high school player, but McKees Rocks, PA, born and bred. So he was a huge recruit for the Vikings, part of this incredible defense that they had, one of the best in Whitfield history at the time, bunch of college players on it. But he was the marquee guy I think he was a corner back then, eventually went on to play safety at Pitt, and obviously is a safety now for the Bills. But he was a 4-star corner, was down to, I think, Penn State, Ohio State, and Pitt. And his commitment was such a big one that, I remember exactly where I was for it when he announced, I think the night before signing day, or maybe it was signing day. I was at a restaurant in, I think it was actually Kennedy Township, so not too far from McKees Rocks. And that's just one of the, you don't remember where you are, where every guy commits, but the big ones you do. So that kind of goes to show just how big of a deal he was coming out of Central. And yeah, going to Pitt, it was a huge coup for them, for Pat Narduzzi, to keep a guy at home who pretty much every program around the country would have been happy to have him in their secondary.
Yeah, I remember I was in college for most of his high school career. And, you follow the Whitfield guys. You want to see where they end up going, especially the big time recruits. And yeah, he was a name I was familiar with despite going to school in a different state. I remember he had one highlight. I think it was in his senior year of the state championship game, where a guy came over the middle and he just absolutely clobbered him. And when he committed to Pitt, that's all I saw on my Twitter feed was, wow, Pitt really got a great corner. And he ended up becoming a safety due to injury. I think it was hip stuff or something like that. They moved him back in the secondary, and he really left an impact there. At close to 300 career tackles, I saw a 2-time All-ACC recognition recipient. And I think most notably, he was a leader. I mean, when in the conversations that I've had with Pitt people, where his name came up, it came up in the same conversation as a guy, Kenny Pickett, they would say Kenny Pickett was the offensive leader and Damar Hamlin was the defensive leader. When all the seniors would talk about, where they learned how to be a leader at Pitt, those were the two guys they really would point to. And, as someone who covered both of those players at Pitt, I mean, what stood out to you about Damar Hamlin on and off the field when he was a Pitt Panther?
Yeah, he was kind of the middle part of that great run of, defensive backs that they had. Jordan Whitehead, Avonte Maddox, Damar and Dane Jackson, who of course end up going to Buffalo together, which was really cool for those two guys. Dane is similar in that, he went to Quaker Valley High School to play football, but was a Cornell High School graduate and is actually from like the Sheridan area of the city of Pittsburgh originally. So they were both, guys who represented their community, but also kind of brought in a whole other, slew of supporters based on where they played their high school and then eventually, of course, their college ball at Pitt. So the thing that always struck me about Damar at Pitt, he was it still is, I think, just based on seeing some of his interviews with the Bills, and pretty low key guy, like doesn't say a lot, not like a real big rah talker. But he was a leader for that team because of the way he played. He played with a ton of passion. I feel like in college, he was always known for kind of suplexing people when he tackled them. I mean, sometimes to his detriment because of penalty, he'd get a penalty flag thrown on him, but he didn't just tackle you. He would lift you off the ground, and which I always thought was interesting because he wasn't like a real jacked dude. Like he was kind of slender. He was kind of a slight build as a safety, but played fearlessly. And like you said, Noah, I mean, he became a leader, a captain for the defense, which I think is always exactly what he wanted to be. Big part of the reason why he stayed home to play for Pitt when he could have been one of the guys who goes elsewhere to, a Penn State or somewhere, Ohio State, somewhere like that. So he loved playing with that kind of, fearlessness at Pitt. I think it's a big reason why the Bills made him a 6th round pick of theirs. He was versatile on the back end, could play in a lot of different roles. So that speaks to his football IQ too. He progressed through the program, even though he came in as somebody who everybody thought he's going to be an instant impact, immediate starter, even potentially. That's not how his story played out. But by the end, was as valuable to anybody on that defense.
And I also want to share just a story here as well. Chris Carter did an interview, my beat partner, a guy who also helps out with you on Steelers coverage, did an interview this morning with Brandon Hill, one of the starting safeties for Pitt over the last couple of years. I included some of the quotes from that interview in the story that I just posted at post-gazette.com that you can read right now. But Brandon Hill was a guy who came in. He was the only safety in Pitt's 2019 recruiting class. So he said that Damar Hamlin essentially took him under his wing, kind of mentored him. And in 2020 during the pandemic, and I know you were off the beat by this time, but I'm sure you're aware of it. Pitt went on an 0-4 losing skid in October, and that loss was ended, or that win streak was ended with a blowout defeat at home against Notre Dame. And right after that loss, Paris Ford, Pitt's other starting safety, another whippy guy, high-end recruit, opted out, and he was going to start preparation for the NFL draft. And in replacement for Ford, Brandon Hill got his first start. And Hill said this to Chris that I wanted to share. He said, "I remember that week. I was a sophomore playing my first college game. He would drive to the bridge on Forbes, where freshmen stayed, and went over film with me. He taught me how to watch film, study the game, and he did that every night that week. He made sure it was a thing I was comfortable with for film and preparation, and I'm so grateful for that." And that film study continued, or it actually contributed, ironically enough. If people remember that game, Brandon Hill's first start was against Florida State that year in Tallahassee, and Brandon Hill had an interception that helped Pitt win that game and snap that losing streak. So, that's just one of many examples that I think Damar Hamlin had as an impactful guy in the locker room, on top of being an impactful guy on the field at Pitt. Eric Hallett, in the story that I interviewed him for a couple months ago, just talked to me about how he was the blueprint. Eric Hallett was also a corner recruit that got moved to safety. And he said, I learned through Damar Hamlin what it takes to really be a great college defensive back and a future pro. And you look at both of those guys now, they're both declaring for the NFL draft. One of them was an All-American. One of them was a two-time All-ACC honoree. And they're getting ready to start their pro careers like Damar Hamlin did. They'll probably be late round guys, and they're going to look to battle their way into a starting lineup like he did in just 2 years in the league. So, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, Damar Hamlin wanted his teammates to be great, but he also wanted the program to be great. I mean, he wanted Pitt to reach heights that it hadn't, under Pat Narduzzi previously. And he really went to great lengths to try to make that happen. And it wasn't just for him. I think it was for, his family too, being from here. I mean, he always took pride in that. I mean, his younger brother, Demir, always around the program, spring games, practices. He was like attached at the hip with Damar. So that was always really cool to observe too, was their relationship. I mean, he was somebody who, I don't know that I've seen a player that I've covered have that tight of a bond with a younger sibling. And I think Demir is now 7 or 8. So that was awesome to see. That one of those little things that always stands out to me too about Damar Hamlin is his relationship, not just with his mom and dad, but his little brother too, who was kind of like an honorary mascot for Pitt when Damar played there.
And who knows, that kid could very well end up being, a Pat Narduzzi recruit 10 years from now. And that would be a great story for one of us to cover as well. But so we'll wrap this up, as a guy who now covers the NFL. I'm willing to bet you have not had to cover anything like what took place Monday night. I don't think you were on the beat when Ryan Shazier was injured. You were still covering Pitt at that time. And even that was a lot different actually, than what happened with Damar. Just wanted to gather your thoughts on everything that took place, how the NFL handled it, how ESPN covered it, the reactions that you noticed from the Bengals and the Buffalo Bills, just anything and everything that stood out to you about everything that took place on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton of criticism for the NFL for the way they handled it. I think the sort of initial vitriol was just from a sense of, again, we're in a society now where people need to have an opinion on something. They need to react. They need to fill this space with all this great unknown of where Damar Hamlin's going, what's happening to him right now, who's with him, what happened on the field, what's the prognosis. Like, we're just in this era of so much information. And in the absence of that, people kind of had to steer their interests elsewhere for the moment. And, I think that's kind of where minds just sort of wander toward, okay, is this being handled as well as it should be by the NFL and the league? Maybe we'll never have a great answer for that. And maybe there is scrutiny that should be on them. But, all we know for sure is that the game did not continue. They're now saying the game won't resume this week. So it sure seems like, the unprecedented nature of this is being handled with the appropriate care and precaution from the decision makers in the league. At some point, the game must go on, the show must go on. You're seeing some of that trickle out already. I mean, Mike Tomlin had his usual weekly Tuesday press conference today and was in no mood really to field a bunch of questions about Damar Hamlin, although he certainly did say his piece about it and how emotional it is for him personally, as somebody who has known him for, I think he said since he was 12 probably, which also goes to show just how good of a young football player he was in the Pittsburgh community. And then, of course, Tomlin got to know him better once he was at Pitt right next door. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a tough deal where everybody is trying to compartmentalize a little bit, I think, as much as you can. It's going to be difficult to really move on and throw your thoughts into football, playoff scenarios, Bills, Bengals, Steelers, until we have some sort of insight into Damar's condition. I think that's just a very human way of thinking about all this. But the harsh reality of it is we don't know when that's going to be. And when we do get another development, we don't know what it's going to be or how substantial it's going to be. everybody wants answers, especially in 2023 in the social media age, but it's not always that simple. So you just hope that all the medical experts down there in Cincinnati are, we know they're doing everything that they can. Damar's doing everything that he can. His family is trying to be as strong as they can be, and in the meantime, life goes on for the rest of us, but it's hard to fathom. It's really hard to wrap your head around all the other kind of outside implications that are now directly and inextricably tied to that horrifying moment last night on the field at Paycor Stadium.
Yeah, I think what I'll remember I will remember a lot about everything that happened. But like what you mentioned, where in today's world where information just comes so quickly, every second that went by where there wasn't an update felt like an hour.
Yeah.
And I think that, it drove a lot of people crazy. It led to some people lashing out toward the league or certain media personalities on social media. And you could debate whether or not whoever deserved some hate for it or whatever. But yeah, it was just unlike anything, because most of the time when you see a guy go down like that, you see him wheeled off on a stretcher or on a cart and you get the thumbs up, or you get the tweet from Adam Schefter 10 minutes later. He was taken to the hospital. He's in stable condition. He's with his family and he's talking. He's fine. And we still haven't got that. The latest update that we have is here's from 1:23 p.m. on Tuesday from the Buffalo Bills. It says Damar Hamlin spent last night in the intensive care unit and remains there today in critical condition at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. We are grateful and thankful for the outpouring of support we have received thus far. And that's really it. I mean, that's not anything different than what we heard from his friend and marketing representative Jordan Mooney last night at 10:30. So
Jordan Rooney, yeah.
Or Jordan Rooney, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary, but it's something that we'll definitely continue to cover. I know I wrote a story on it. Jason Mackey has a piece coming out. I believe he wrote something also earlier this morning, and we'll probably have a lot more content related on it. And we will continue to monitor this situation as developments are made available.
And the Steelers locker room will be open tomorrow. I mean, players are off today. If people were wondering, why hasn't there been reaction from the guys who were, on the other side of that building when Damar was at Pitt, it's still going to be a tough deal. I don't know if guys are going to want to talk about that tomorrow morning, but I mean, there are certainly questions about the kind of seismic, the ripple effects through the league. What effect does this have on NFL players from a mental health kind of standpoint? Does this change the way they view the game or the sport, something this unprecedented? So, I mean, it's just a lot to think about. It's a lot to really kind of put into perspective. But I think the biggest thing right now is, you think good thoughts for Damar Hamlin and his family, and you'll kind of deal with everything else as it comes. But if your head is spinning right now, I can't blame you. We'll see what the Steelers kind of do the rest of the week in terms of responding and reacting to this. But I assume they'll practice tomorrow, and we'll cover it, but obviously with heavy hearts until you know what's going on here and have a fuller picture of the whole situation.
Yep, and we'll have coverage and updates on Damar Hamlin and the entire situation as it continues to develop. Brian, I just want to thank you for your time today. I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate your insight here, and keep up the good work on your end. I'll try to do the same on mine. To everyone who viewed in, thank you as always for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and keep tuned in to our site and our YouTube channel for more Pittsburgh sports coverage here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.